Hello everyone, welcome to my nature diaries. I am going to showcase today how to draw bark, and I'm going to be doing it in two different ways. On the left side I'm going to be using pen and ink mostly to demonstrate it, and then on the right hand side I'm going to be also demonstrating in watercolor. So I'll make sure you watch till the end to see how I get that done. In this case, I'll be using a dip pen and permanent ink, but you can use microns or whatever you have to sketch with. I just like to use these dip pens because of the nib variation in them. I have here some pieces of bark that I collected from the ground and from different hikes, and you can see the different levels of texture. Here's a really smooth one, and then the first one I had was very rough, and then the middle one right there is slightly textured. It's rough but not as much, and it's really important when we're getting ready to draw or paint to look at that texture. And you can see here, this is the tree I'm going to be doing. It's a shagbark hickory, and just like the name implies, the bark is very textured, very rough. And because of that, I'm going to be using a lot more contrast in my drawing. And that's important to know as well, is that the more texture you have, the higher the contrast. And if that helps you when you are going to draw, then, you know, that's just a tip to help you to be able to plan out what you're going to do. Now I'm just taking my pen, and you can see I'm very roughly going along the edges of the tree because it is a rough textured bark, and I want to make sure that I'm showing that. And I'm making these little rectangle shapes or strips because that is very reminiscent of this particular tree. And then I'm going to go back and add shadows. This is one of my biggest tips when it comes to drawing or painting bark, is to make sure you get those shadows, that depth, that texture by adding those contrasts of light and dark. And so whether you do it with ink or paint or anything else, you really need to just go back in and make sure that you're showing that shadow that's coming from the piece of bark that is pulled away from the tree. Now, most bark you wouldn't have to do as much as of shading as I am, but because of this intense shagginess of this tree, I'm able to just go in and go really dark. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to journal this tree, is that I thought it was so interesting. For now, I'm done on that left-hand side, and we're going to go over to the right-hand side, and I cropped a photo that I took of another shagbark hickory, and I love the knots and the texture of this particular trunk, and I wanted to showcase it even more in this little box here. So I'm going to roughly sketch this out now with pencil this time, and I'm not going in with ink right away. That's the difference. And I wanted to make sure I marked all the little holes or knots that are on the tree, and then just to try to also show the bigger shaded and light parts of the tree. I'm not worried about getting it super exact. I'm just trying to get the idea or gist of what it looks like. As I paint the background, I'm just going in very, very light. The paper that I'm using in this journal is really more like mixed media paper, and it's not very good, especially with wet on wet. So I'm just going to take my time and add layers to this little vignette or this picture, and so you'll see it get darker as I go along and let it dry. The colors that I'm using are from the Windsor Newton Cotman student grade palette, and I would suggest keeping a limited palette when you are nature journaling or doing anything like this, because it's just an easy way to keep all your paintings consistent and looking alike because you're using the same colors. The difference with this composition that I'm doing now is I'm actually going in really light with the watercolors, and I'm adding now burnt sienna. I had some light green in there, and then I'm going to add some burnt umber, and then I will just keep adding colors, let it dry, and go in and try to highlight underneath the bark. I've now switched over to a fine liner brush, and I'm going to continue adding colors, going from light to dark, mostly browns. I might add a little green in there because there's some algae on the bark, and I'm just going to kind of experiment as I do so, and eventually my watercolor mix will become heavier. Instead of it being so watery in the beginning, I'm now starting to go into a little bit more straight color, and I'm switching over here to Payne's Gray, and I'm starting out a little bit light with it, but eventually I will darken that as well. Trees and their bark are typically, at least these kind of trees, are typically gray or black, but they do have some brown undertones, and so I like the variation of color. It adds interest to the painting and composition, but I do want it to look overall gray or dark like it would if I were to see it somewhere on a hike. And as I finish that up, I'm switching over now just for a little bit to a micron, and this is a 0.005. It's really the finest tip size that you can get. And I'm going to just outline a few little areas, because sometimes when I'm painting, I feel a little lost. I'm not sure where to go. So as long as I know I'm going to ink the illustration anyway, I'll go ahead and start inking in the middle of it. And I like to do this technique where I paint and then ink, and then go back to paint, and I do that a little bit here and there, but that really helps me to be able to visualize or picture what it is that I'm trying to paint. Going back to the brush, I am just working on now adding some more darks to it, and I'm just trying to use the paintbrush to kind of give me those shadows and also give me the overall sense of the color of the bark. And I think it's one of those things where if you just take your time and add some color, step back, stop and let it dry, and then go back and look at it again, it's really a great way to paint, because you're not just painting something and then you're done. You're kind of waiting, adding things as you go. I really like now how it turned out. I feel very pleased with it, and you can see I added more color to the tree and the background. And on the left there, that tree, I'm going to tweak a little bit more as well, so stay tuned for that. If you are still watching, I want to thank you so much for doing that, and also to subscribe if you haven't already. Like, comment, let me know if you like to paint trees or draw trees, and what your tips are, or if any of these tips might have helped you or taken away some of the fear of drawing them yourself. If you haven't had a chance to draw or paint trees or bark, I highly suggest doing it. They're just fun things to paint, and you can really just be loose and sketchy with them and create something really amazing. So make sure you give it a try, and if you do, let me know, or let me know if you think you're going to give it a try. I'd appreciate it. On the left-hand side tree, I did end up shading it on the sides to make it look more circular and round, and I'm so glad I did, because I like how that turned out. Well, I hope this has helped and inspired you in any way, and please watch some more videos, and also you have to remember that you are amazing and creative as well. Till next time, bye.